Welcome everybody to another Gotham Chess openings video. Today we're taking a look at something known as the Trompowsky Attack, which is why we had Trump and a trumpet, although it is spelled with an O. I had to put it on the thumbnail, it looked funny. The Trompowsky served me very well. It got me from about high 2000 up to 2300 and it helped me beat a lot of masters. And the Trompowsky is very useful because with white, you play d4, black plays knight to f6, and you take all the Nimso players, all the Benko and Benoni players, all the Grunfeld and King's Indian players, and so on and so forth out of their comfort zone by playing 2 bishop g5. So as always, this part, we're going to take a look at the theory. The moves are in the description for you guys to use however you'd like afterward, and then I play 2 games against my subscribers. The theory part, I'm going to try to give you specific moves to remember at specific moments, and basically just big picture stuff. So, why do you put your bishop on g5? Well, if black plays the move d5, just putting a pawn into the center, and black has other moves, which we will look at, you have the option to take. And if you can take and damage their pawn structure, like pawn takes f6 or g takes f6, maybe you are happy. And that is what you are trying to do early. Damage the pawn structure, put your opponent into an uncomfortable and new territory, and here, just get simple development. One thing to remember is that when the pawn is on d5, you maybe want to play e3, and either put your bishop out to g2, like this, later on putting your knights into the middle, and that might look something like this, with castles, bishop to g2, for example, c6, knight e2, and castles, building up a queenside pawn expansion to kind of complement your bishop, and notice all your pawns are on dark squares, because you've traded off your dark squared bishop, very easy to play this position, or you want to be a lot more direct, and for example, you want to just go toward the middle with a move like c2 to c4, and then put your knights out a little bit more traditionally. Black is always going to be okay here, but you can expand on that queen side, making this sort of progress and trying to break through on that opponent's side. Now, when they play d5, you don't actually have to take. The Trompowsky is useful because you get your bishop out, and then you can develop your pieces kind of in the style of a London. And what I mean by that is something like e3. Now, we'll take a look at what to do when the knight jumps here. Bear with me. Don't just, people write comments like, hey, you didn't cover this. And then like 4 minutes later, I cover it. Move like e3. If they play c5, then more often than not, when they've played d5 already, you're going to restructure like this. You'll play knight to d2 and bishop to d3. And one thing that I'd like to show you is something called the stonewall structure. And what I mean by the stonewall structure is after you get your development, bishop e7, knight to d2, c5, c3, something like this. Here, notice how we haven't played knight to f3. Do you notice that? We haven't just played knight to f3. Why? Because we want to play f4. We want to get the stonewall structure to have a clamp on the center, control that square with our knight and our bishop, and then we will develop this knight. So for example, we can get a position that looks like take like this. And this is very useful because normally in the stonewall, your bishop is terrible. It's trapped behind the pawns, but now it's not. And this bishop will be so useful to attack. So for example, I've had some games where I'll play like b6, and I won't even castle. I mean, you can castle, and then you can plant your knight, and then you can go like rook up, rook over, and just start some sort of attack on them. I've had games where instead of castling, I'll just play like h4, they'll go here, and I'll Greek gift them. I'll just play like bishop takes h7 check, king takes h7, I'll just go all in like this. Obviously takes will lead to my queen, and I just go crazy, just go and attack them. Now, you can't be, you might rush it a little bit, and blitz and bullet, you might get away with it. And in a longer game, you just take your time. I mean, you get to a position where maybe, you play a knight to f3, a g4, or something like that, and you get some sort of big attack. But you delay the development of this knight in these positions where you both kind of clash on d4 and d5, and then you go for this stonewall structure with f4. So keep this in mind, right? When they play h6, maybe you take, but you don't want to let them get e5. That's why we go here, because we don't want to let them break out. And of course, your game might look different. I mean, things will go a little bit differently. Like if they play bishop to f5, it's useful to take, and switch it up, maybe back to the c4 system. You'll notice that instead of bishop f5, like they played e6, and you're not really going to take here because they have the queen. But that's d5, right? What happens if on the second move, they don't play d5, they play c5? So to me, c5 is the most challenging option. Against this, what I really like to do is I like to put that pawn, wedging it into d5. And oftentimes, we can play c4 f3, and e4. And we get this massive pawn wall. And, you know, just for, obviously, black is not going to play like this, but just so you understand what that looks like, this is the wall. And this wall is so difficult to crack. Now, the reason c5 is the most challenging is that black has this queen b6 move. And in many positions, black actually will mobilize. Now, first of all, later on, you'll see I have a game. My opponent does this. Against check, we just like to block with the pawn. It doesn't change too much. And against queen b6, you have something known as the Vaganyan gambit. So in this position, you can play knight to c3, gambiting the pawn. In a lot of these positions, you can gambit this pawn, and you can bring the bishop back. Queen has to go back, and you play e4, f4, knight f3. This is something you need to study, okay? Don't just watch this video and go, oh, I know everything. You go lose like 4 games, go, Gotham's a terrible teacher. No, I'm telling you right now, that stonewall structure, you might not need to study so much. The Vaganyan gambit, you got to spend a little bit of time memorizing, you know, practicing against yourself, your dog, your cat, your fish, you know, your significant other, whatever. So c5, I like to meet with d5. And then after that, I like to play knight c3, e4, if I can. Just put both pawns in the center. Maybe c4 and knight c3. And you can study those positions on your own. Now, e6 is another common move because people want to play the Nimzo-Indian. So against e6, you have 2 options. Number 1, you could just play it the way we play that other structure. You know, knight d2. And then after d5, it's going to look very similar. You go for that stonewall structure. Maybe they're going to go like c5. Against c5, just e3 is completely fine. And again, you kind of try to go back maybe to the stonewall structure. You don't have to... The point of this video is not to make you play the stonewall structure in every damn game. Okay, it's also just to make you play chess. Like, just play normal chess. You don't need to play the stonewall every single time you can. And the stonewall is only good against d5 structures. Black can also play knight to e4. And you're going to get this a lot because people are going to be like, I don't want them to take my knight. Now my bishop's hanging. So I have 2 recommendations here. The one that I play the most on chess.com is this move h4. This is known as the Raptor variation. It's one of my favorites. It's super wacky. And the point is that if at any point, they take, you take, and you have this open file, and this is actually very annoying for black because, for example, let's say they play like d5, you're going to push this pawn. And they can't take because of their rook. And if they take like this is such an ugly structure. You can immediately go attack it. E3, bishop d3, and you're going to have some nasty tactics like check, take, and you're going to win the rook. Like just so you see that. Look at that. Check, take, and then you're going to win the rook. And you have it in reverse. You can also take, and then they take, and then you take this. And it's a check, and you're going to win that back. So that you also have. Now, you also don't have to do that. You can just play normal, e3, bishop d3, f4. Try to replace your pawns on the dark squares, as I've been saying, because you've traded your dark squared bishop. And the rest of the policies apply. I mean, if c5, you know, you have your d5, right? You get that wedge. If queen to b6, you know, there's some tricky lines in queen b6 positions. In this case, you can't play here. This is not the Vaganyan gambit. But Levy, that looks so similar. Well, in the other position, the knight is there. You can't go here. They're just going to take you, right? Like, you don't, I mean, that's, right? So that's the difference. There's some lines with knight e4 and queen b6 you have to study. You have to review these lines because there's a lot of gambit lines where you can move your knight, sacrificing the pawn, and then, you know, you build up your center a little bit later. Do make sure to study those. But there's also this move, bishop to c1. You say, why would I ever do that? That looks so dumb. Well, they can't really attack you. That's the beauty. You know, and by the way, this can happen if they play c5 on the second move as well. You actually can just straight up go back to c1. You haven't really damaged your structure, you know? And then, for example, g6, you know, you play f3, e4, c4, or knight c3, and back, right? Like, and you haven't, like, everything's good. All looks normal, right? So you have a lot of these bishop back to c1 maneuvers when the queen comes out to b6 as well. So whichever you prefer. You can play h4, or, you know, if they play knight to e4 attacking your bishop, you can just go back to f4. There's a training game later I play against the 1900 rated player, and now it kind of looks like a London, actually. So, for example, if they play d5, you can play 2 ways. Number 1 is e3, bishop d3, and kind of do our usual thing. You're not going to be able to play a Stonewall here, but you play a London, and, you know, there's some lines, for example, where you can actually just take the knight. I actually really like to do this because then this pawn just becomes a liability. They just have this target here, and, you know, if they try desperately to defend it, you can check them with the queen and get a very nice position, long castle, go in a big attack. And if they play knight to e4, bishop f4, and c5, which is the training game later, then d5, f3, and e4 is kind of the way to go. The training game goes like this: queen a5 here, and then in this position, I actually play the move e4. I just completely gambit this pawn with the idea to gambit a second pawn, and in this position, there's an incredible move, bishop to c7. And bishop c7 basically cuts the opponent from escaping, and then you can try to trap the queen. So, for example, if, like, they play, you know, d6, there's some lines where this queen gets very unfortunately located. So something like, you know, rook to b1, rook b3, knight e2, bishop c4. Like, the queen has almost no moves, and it's actually very scary. Black might play, like, knight a6. You can give check, block, and trap the queen soon with, like, knight e2. I mean, just keep chasing the queen around. So I went a little bit fast, but you have the notes in the description if you ever want to play around with those. And if you don't want to get involved in any of this, you know what to do. Bring that bishop back to c1. Don't gambit anything. And then when they go here, f3, e4. And this is just so annoying for black to deal with because you're just going to wedge that in there, and people melt when they don't have space. Playing without a lack of space is a problem for many people. And from here on out, you know, you'll just go here and here. So those are your two main options. You know, you have, against e6, you have a choice. You can take a big center, and then if they do this, make this big center trade, and your position looks nice here, or play the standard way with knight d2, e3. If they play d5, you can go for that setup or take, and you know, against c5 and knight e4 and a combination of those two moves, you either have your raptor variation with h4, or just bring the bishop back like normal. And then here, this d5, and try to get that wedge with the two pawns. Sometimes gambiting that b2 pawn, those lines you have to memorize a bit more, or you run into some trouble. Or just bring that bishop back to c1, and then expand in the center. So, you know, that was hopefully as good of a, you know, 12-minute introduction as I can give you. Please don't think that now you've learned all of the Trompowsky. Don't give yourself any false perceptions, but I did want to give you a theoretical overview before we jump into the two games. Happy hunting. Let's go play a few games. For today, I have a few subscribers who are actually quite high rated, 1600 and 1900 Blitz. It's very tough to find a good range for these videos because the truth is, a lot of you might not be 1900. A lot of you might be 12, 13, 1400, right? And so, you know, it can always be a little bit tricky for me to find kind of that right range. Opponent goes e6, and I actually told my opponent, who is a Nimso Indian player, as I talked about in the introduction, this could be one very good way to kind of deal with Nimso players, and go for this setup known as the big center variation. So, Black is thinking, it could be very non-standard for a player to have to deal with a position like this, because the queen is out, right? So c5 is not a bad move. Now, we don't want to take that. I think just naturally developing here with knight to f3 is perfectly reasonable. And if knight c6, we can just go d5. Knight c6 is a bit of a strange move. The thing is, we have good reinforcement in the center, so we can also play like bishop to e2 and not really worry about this. Or we can go d5 takes, pawn takes, and then if the knight comes to e5, maybe we play like queen e2, pinning it, and it's just a wacky game. For now, I'm just going to play bishop to e2. Certainly, there is nothing wrong with this move. And if pawn takes, we at least get to put our second knight into the center of the board, so that's nice. And now we wait. In fact, I'm actually thinking, I was actually worried here for my opponent to go queen f4. Or like queen g6, like one of these two moves. So, okay, we have kind of everything we talked about. Queen g6 was threatening both my pawns. Actually wonder if I if I made some small error there. But now we kind of have the perfect big center variation. We have bishop takes, pawn takes, and oh, we have a game of chess to be played. And, of course, as I showed in the intro, you don't have to go e4. You can play the position. I'm going to go rook c1. You can play the position basically the same way you do in a lot of the other positions with the knight on d2 and getting that pyramid structure. Like, you could do that if you want, you know? But I wanted to show the big center variation because it's got a funny name. It's called big center. From here, you know, the passive nature of the bishop on c8 will be important for me. So on that move, I now have access to the d5 square, which is something that I didn't have before. I think it would have been better for my opponent to take my knight and then play e5, which would have made a lot of sense. I would have probably continued with d5 and then playing on the queen side, so trying to kind of infiltrate on this side of the board and attack there. But now, after the knight comes to d5, there's problems. So first of all, I see the bishop and the queen. I'm threatening, actually, not to take the bishop, but I'm threatening to take the knight, removing the defender of the bishop, which will grant me a position where I am I have two pieces for the rook. But let me just think here for a second. I can also take, and then, like, somehow win a pawn. Now, winning a pawn is nice, but I actually think playing rook takes c6 is even stronger. So there it is. Now I'm threatening this. I think my opponent should play queen to b6, attacking my knight. And this pawn. And then I don't know. Then a5 is coming. It's not so simple. I think on queen b6. I mean, I wanted to move my queen. I kind of like queen a4, which attacks. It counterattacks that pawn, which I kind of like. Now, if pawn takes, I can actually take this. Because even though they can take my knight, I can take the rook, which is important. I also can just take with the knight, and then when they pin me, I have knight to e7 check, which might be missed. And this is nice for me. If I can just get the knight back, I'm just, you know, I'm doing very well. I got my two knights in the center of the board. The presence of the rooks is really not felt. I mean, that's why basically, on average, like 8 to 9 times out of 10, the two pieces are going to be better than the rook, because you just actually feel the presence of those pieces. Whereas the presence of the rook is not really felt. Now I'll drop this back. Now I also have an extra pawn, so I have two knights and a pawn for a rook. After the middle game settled, opponent takes on. I don't know why I thought that that was not possible. I thought that somehow I was going to trap the queen here. I guess if I take, interesting. Okay, let me. So what do I want? Do I want two bishops? Sorry, do I want bishop and knight versus rook, or do I want two knights? Take, bishop c4. I guess we'll do that. We'll take, and then we'll go here, targeting this. I think bishop and knight are a better combo to have on the board than two knights. Two knights are good, but can be very passive. Like, very slow, I should say. Not passive, but slow. Okay, I really want to go queen to d7. That move just speaks to me. This move hits both pawns. I don't think they can both be protected. I will pick one up, and then I will try to pick up the other. For example, rook f7 just loses the bishop to e6, or queen e6. This rook, I can also take that pawn, which would be nice. Takes. Check. Here. And queen b7. Now both of these are hit. And we just have the extra knight. And there's not much else. Hope you're all having a great day, by the way. Thanks for making it this far in the video. You never know how, you know, when you make it into a Gotham Chess video, how far you make it into one, whether or not I'll compliment you. So, well, no, I'll pretty much always compliment you. You just don't know when it's going to happen. Take on a7. At this point, I mean, just make a luff for your king. And the game should be over. I just don't ever want to get mated. My king will always have a getaway. And I mean, you can win this game in a lot of ways. Trade the queen, trade a rook. Push pawn. And, you know, if you end up with the extra knight, you can get it all the way down to knight and pawn versus king. For example, you trade the rooks, you trade the queen, maybe you lose the a-pawn, you trade the pawns down. Knight and pawn, all you need is one pawn. So, you have that one pawn, you're going to win the game very easily. And I mean, I can also bring in my knight. Frankly, what I should be doing is bringing in my rook. But I'm not doing that. I'm just sort of letting my opponent's playing a little bit slowly. Now I'll play rook d1. The good thing is that now my rook can actually leave, whereas before it couldn't. I'll go queen a6, threatening a check and to push the pawn. Rook behind the passed pawn is generally a good protocol, so I could play rook a1. Okay, this allows a queen trade, so now the check comes with an attack, and now rook behind the pawn, and now we just bring everybody over here. We push. If the king attacks me, I will fork and win the knight, win the rook. That's gonna be the end of the game. GG to Mr. Precision. Let's just quickly analyze that. So we know c5, you know, knight f3, knight c6. Okay, it looks like d5 is the way to go. It actually looks like d5 is what the computer likes, and it likes this. Oh, and it likes knight d2. Okay, so computer thinks that this position is quite nice, getting this kind of structure. For example, bishop d6 runs into knight e4, so there's no way that's any good. I guess I should have played it like that, because the way I played it very solidly with this move, you know, I was worried about queen g6. Okay, apparently it's stupid to worry about queen g6, so very interesting, because you can just castle. Wow. And then if takes, just knight c3, and then d5. Amazing, look at that. That's actually fascinating. That's why it's so useful to analyze your games after they're over. I was looking at the position like, hey, I kind of worried about queen to g6, maybe attacks my stuff. No, and then the way, you know, the way this works, you know, now white just is very pleasant. Now here, you know, again, I was saying bishop c3 is something to try to play e5. Of course, you have to push. Like, you have to have some advantage in the position. If you trade, you have no advantage. So by doing this, you have a space advantage. And then by going here, you are not allowing the bishop to leave because b7 is weak. So the opponent can rotate the pieces that way. But, you know, you're going to focus on this side of the board. And then you can also play a move like g3 in the future, which prevents the knight from ever coming forward. If the bishop goes to g4, this is not under any threat because it's actually very well protected. So, you know, that's one way. And the other way, obviously, is to go all the way back and, well, play just knight d2 and e3. So, there you go. Next guy. Now, this guy's very strong. I've played this guy many times. Frosty M. There you go. d4. In fact, I believe I lost to him once. Bishop to g5. And as I said in the intro, there is this h4, but I'm going to go bishop f4. Because this one's a little bit more, it's a little bit more normal. Now, c5 is a move. There's a lot of options here. Personally, my favorite is just to play d5. But, like I said, there's also this move f3. And f3 leads to some really fascinating positions. So first of all, on queen a5 check, you just block. And then even here you can take, but personally, you know, d5 here is something I really like. And these positions are fascinating because you take so much central space. People don't know what to do. Like, they completely melt when you do this. So queen b6 hits this. Not a bad move. There's a move bishop c1 here, which just looks completely absurd. There's also probably queen d2 just guarding. There's probably also b3. It's probably a handful of moves. I think knight d2. No, knight d2, there's knight d5. e4, queen b2. Something like this. How about we do e4? We gambit the pawn. Okay, opponent is not interested in our gambit of the pawn, and instead opts to play more solidly. Okay, that's fair. What about knight a3 here and knight to b5? Wow. We are getting creative today. All these kind of advanced pawn positions give you a lot of tactical... Can I play knight b5? I'm just going to take queen here, knight b5 to try to get to c7. And then the queen can get trapped if they're not careful. Very wacky position. When in doubt, just like develop, you know, just play bishop to e7. But then even there, we're threatening like d6. And at the moment, we're threatening knight c4. So there are no easy solutions here. Okay, I mean, I have bishop b5. Bishop b5, knight c4. I mean, bishop b5 is a move, but I don't really know if I want to trade anything. So let's just play knight c4. Ah, now we give a check. and they can't defend this. Because right now the bishop is guarding, and if the bishop gets... Okay, yeah, if it gets there, it's pinned. Oh, this is very nice for us now. Okay, I guess I will long castle. So now my opponent's king is stuck in the center. I would anticipate something like b5. I mean, I feel like if you've made it this far in the game with black, like, you need to create something. Otherwise, you're just going to get completely run over. So I think you need to play b5 and look for counterplay. Now, what I will do is probably bring my knight back. I don't really think I'm going to bring it here. Just seems like it's getting in the way of the pawn storm. I'll transfer my knight out here. And, or maybe back to... I don't know. Maybe back to d2. And then just take a little bit more space. But the Trompowsky leads to some super strange positions, as discussed in the intro, and as portrayed by this game. Opponent going for a thing. Like I said, I think b5 is basically the only move. I mean, you can maybe try bishop here, and there it is, finally. Okay, knight to d7, g4. That's a free pawn, but... Ugh. Although, to be honest, actually, I have to tell you, who cares about this? I mean, like, what if I just put my queen on a4, for example? Like, I understand there's a mate threat. I mean, I'm supposed to be afraid, but... Is it really so scary? I'll go queen a4. I mean, queen b6 threatens mate. That's certainly unpleasant. But my knight is going back to c4 from where it will guard mate. Yes, see, and now I can trade queens. Although knight takes d5 is possible. I missed that. In fact, either of the knights can take on d5. Guarding the queen and getting the knight out of danger. But actually then queen c7, knight c7, and bishop takes. So no, I take that back. Take. You know, the thing is this. If they're going to attack you on this side of the board, who's their most powerful attacking piece? It's the queen, so of course you trade the queen. I mean, the queen is the biggest and scariest piece that the opponent has, so just get rid of it. Now again, I'm looking for ways for how my opponent can kind of get in over here. So I think I'm just gonna go b3. I kind of am anticipating something like a5, and then maybe just a4, like we just block everything up. And we really shouldn't have any problems. Maybe g4, very, very tough to say like what the priority of the position for me should be. I guess bishop g7 is coming. So, okay, let's go c4. Let's make this nice little cascade of pawns. We will be completely out of the way of the bishop. Again, I completely anticipate a5, like without any question. I'm going to develop my bishop just because I have to develop pieces. And then my knight has to get developed. Now, my opponent has this move knight to h5, which is actually very annoying. So, for example, here, like, I would run into that. So I think I should go g4. And I think I will go g4, because again, we're trying to restrict the play here. And then a5, we play a4, and it seems like all of our opponent's initiative has been completely suppressed. On the queen side, down the middle, and on the king side. And this is kind of like vintage positional style Trompowsky play, this kind of dominant spatial center with the light squared pawns. A lot of light squared pawns, a lot of light squared control. It's very tough for black to move, frankly. I mean, what can I say? I think knight h3 and, you know, rook e1 is coming. I'm going to get a couple more moves to consolidate, then I'll start trading pieces. And then we will be winning in the endgame. Okay, so I think against this... Do I play g5 or do I play like something like that and just try to keep controlling? I don't know. g5, knight h7, maybe opponent wants to put the bishop here in trade. Doesn't actually look like the most egregious thing. So let me just go here. Let me just go there. Continue to try to restrict the play here. Okay, hg, hg. They want a rook trade. I'm not going to take. Anytime you have rooks staring at each other like this, you don't want to be the guy taking. Or the gal. You don't want to take because you just surrender control of the file. So, okay, finally this move has happened. And now finally I will play a4. So the queen side has been totally locked down. Okay, now that's actually very different because I can take. And there's no rook. So I think I will. And now I'll play king c2. And maybe my knight will land there. Maybe that's the next step for me. But we've completely shut our opponent down on the queen side, down the middle, and on the king side. So it's everything I kind of described in the lesson section, the theory section. This is sort of a picture perfect thing where all of our pieces work together. We're completely, you know, playing on our opponent's passive piece play. Kind of want to trade this bishop. This seems like black's strongest piece. But if I play g5, then knight h5. So it's not trivial. I think I'll go here. So I'm gonna make that trade, knight for bishop. Now I expect a4, of course. I mean, it would be kind of crazy not to play a4. And take. You know, I have to be a little bit careful. So rook a1, maybe there's knight g4, rook here, take, rook a7 at the end. Man, it's like anything but easy. Anything but easy. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's do it. I think, okay, well, we didn't get knight takes there, so now we just infiltrate and we take. All of that calculating, and then opponent doesn't even play knight g4. But, man, that was definitely a fun game. I mean, now we pick up everything, basically, once we get in. Yeah, rook f7, and it just all falls apart for black. They cannot guard everything. And it's all weak. Bishop g5, or bishop g6, or bishop d6. I hung a piece, but I have bishop c7. Oh, I blundered. Because they have king e8. Wow. I made a mistake. Uh-oh. Oh, man. Okay, check, and oh, man, well. There was something there. There was a little something that could have caught me with. Okay, but now I have check. See, this is the difference, and now we have this. Check. It's still going to be a photo finish, or it's going to be mate. Man, that was an intense game, though. Bishop c7 is a nice checkmate, but let's analyze that one real quick. That one, you know, we take a look at the opening. There's e4, and obviously we know this queen b2 line. But the opponent didn't do that and just gave us this. And once we have this, you know, we got everything. Like, actually, this was just a very decent game. I'm curious if maybe okay, no, I mean, computer likes taking the pawn. It likes a lot of what I did, actually. Okay, it doesn't like the queen trade. It actually doesn't like the queen trade. Computer thinks just go back. Oh, well, there you go. I was too quick to trade the queen. I respected my opponent's attack a little bit too much. And then we got such a locked position that it was a little bit hard to convert it at, you know, at some moments. But for the most part, this is kind of like the perfect trump. Like, what more to say? You know, maybe this was a little bit too much, but I'm curious here if knight takes g4 was a good move. I was going to go here, here. Taking is bad. Just king d2 would have been nice. And here white is doing very well because we get in. Well, I mean, not much else to say. That's two Trompowskys. As I mentioned in the intro, all the moves are in the description for you to enter into any PGN reader that you'd like, analyze with any chess software that you'd like. As always, if there's any content that I haven't yet covered, openings, historical games, and so on and so forth, do let me know in the comments below. Like the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. If I catch you here in like the 30th minute of this video and you haven't yet subscribed, do me a favor and do that. And the Trompowsky is one of my recommendations in my D4 course. Link is in the description. I'll see you in the next video.